Okay. Time is precious, and hopefully by starting a minute early, we will just be able to get 1 minute more from our next speaker, Steve Wheeler, who is an independent learning innovation consultant, but also a journalist and a broadcaster. He worked as a teacher of educators for 20 years, has great experience, and traveled the world to talk about his research. His research interest is at learning innovation and distance learning, with particular focus on social media and the pedagogy of cyber cultures and a lot of interesting things. He's a very engaging speaker who has delivered keynote speeches in 35 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And today he's going to talk to us about learning at the workplace. So without further ado, the stage is yours,
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you, Ildiko. I love what you've done with the place here. This is really nice design. I think she deserves a round of applause, don't you? It's a great chair. Yeah. And also, those guys at the back are really working hard. The tech crew, I think they need a good round of applause too. Thank you, guys. Keeping this going. It's not an easy thing to do. It's great to be here. At my age, I think it's great to be anywhere, to be perfectly honest with you. You know? And I love being in Germany. It's probably one of my favorite places to be at this time of the year, in Berlin. I nearly didn't make it. I nearly got arrested at the airport. It felt like it anyway. You know, there's 3 alleyways that you go through. There's the green aisle, which is nothing to declare. And then there's a red one, which is things to declare. And then there's the arrivals from the European Union. Yeah? So which one did I go down? I go down through the arrivals to the European Union. And I get stopped. The guy says, sorry, it's closed off. And I thought, how did they know I was British? Yeah, they've got something in them, haven't they? But anyway, I thought this first slide looks pretty good because it's Spidey and he's reading a book and he's obviously working at the moment, and you know, and the talk was about, you know, is there space for learning in the workspace? I'd like to also add, is there time for learning in the workplace? And I think a lot of managers would balk at that. I heard 2 managers once talking in a corridor. And one of them said to the other, he said, this training that we're giving all of our employees is really, really expensive, isn't it? I mean, what if we train them all up and we spend all that money on them and then they leave? And the other one looked at him and said, what if they don't and they stay? And I think he nailed it, really, because really what we're looking at here is people are important. Sorry about this, sorry. Important, that's better. You know, this was actually a mistake that I made, a typo mistake that I made making these slides, and I thought I'll keep it in. Because actually, if you don't empower people, they become impotent. And learning is probably the best empowerment that you can give people. I think without that type of learning, where we can empower ourselves, then what are we doing in an organization in the first place? The thing is, if we promote learning that can be applied, in what we call learning transfer, we're onto a winner, because our employees, the people who work with us and for us, will not only empower themselves, they'll also empower the whole community, the whole environment around them. It's about what I call human intellectual capital. I wrote a book about this recently. I'm not plugging the book, but if you want copies of it, then I've got some flyers there. You can get some percentages off through the publisher. But really what I was trying to do with the book was show that actually human intellectual capital is really valuable. It's probably the most valuable asset any company has. Yeah, please do take slide copies if you want. I think I'm going to leave this for distribution to anyone who wants it. Everything that you're going to see on these slides is Creative Commons, so you can use it for free. All you do is attribute it back to me or the person I sourced it from. All right, it's all copyright free. But I think the important thing to remember is, look, how do we learn in organizations? How do we learn anywhere? Yeah, when we leave school, we enter the world of work, we enter the world of higher education. This is a really useful model that Lombardo and Elskinger actually present. It's not something that you should take strictly as exactly 70, 20, 10%, but it does show that only 10% or thereabouts, a small proportion of what we learn actually comes from formal learning. The rest of it is really on the job, isn't it? It's really what we do. Look at your own experience. Look at what you do in your own place of work. Essentially, you learn a lot of what you're doing on the job. You learn it through trial and error. You learn it through talking to people. You learn it through connections, social events. You learn it through, sometimes through training programs, but it's very rare that you learn much through those because they're so formalized, they're so focused. And often they hit and miss the mark at the same time. So it's a bit of a hit and miss situation. Most of our work is around tasks and problems that we're solving, and that's where the learning comes from. So with that in mind, what did you have this morning for breakfast? I don't think I noticed. Shall I carry on? What did you have this morning for breakfast? Well, I didn't have marmalade because they didn't have it on the menu, but I was once a marmalade maker. That was one of the first jobs I did. When I was at college, during the summer break, to make a bit of money, because students are always, broke, aren't they? I went to a factory and started, it was a canning factory, and we were canning fruit. And on one occasion, they said to me, okay, I want you to make the marmalade today. And I thought, well, I've never done that before. So the foreman took me to one side, and he said, here's the big cutting machine. Watch your fingers. These big cans of pulped orange here come straight from Spain. You put them up onto the top, you press the button, and they open up, and then you dump the whole lot into a vat. And when the vat's full, they take it away and bring you another one. Are you okay with that? I said, yeah. He said, and that was it. That was my training was over. So I started doing this, taking the great big cans, putting them up onto the top, cutting them, opening them up, dumping it, and they would take the vats away. And I got really good at this. I thought, this is all right. And then I picked up a can, and it was lighter than all the others, and I thought, that's a bit strange. No one had told me anything about it, so I picked it up. It felt like it was vibrating a little bit as well. I thought, what's going on there? So I opened it anyway, and as I opened the top, thousands of black flies flew out, infested the whole factory. There were grown men and women running, screaming from the building. It was like a horror film. They had to close the whole factory down for 24 hours and de-infest it. And it was all because I hadn't been properly trained. It was all because nobody had warned me that that kind of thing might happen. So the thing is, when training is missing the mark, when we're not learning what we should be learning in our job, that can damage not just productivity, but it can also damage the reputation of the whole company, can't it? So this is why I'm saying that learning is so important. But is there time for learning in the workplace? Is there space for learning in the workplace? Well, there should damn well be, and I'm going to go back to this one here, because performance matters, but learning is the basis of that performance. And it's the most valuable, I think, of all the commodities, like I said. So look at this. I mean, this is the training room. And so we say, okay, well, it's a bit bland. And I think Eric Scheninger showed something similar this morning if you were in this session. So there it is. They're all sat in rows. This is the traditional training room. Not saying every organization is like this, but some of them still are. And so we think we'll put technology in, that will improve it. And all basically you're doing there is putting people into that same bounded situation where there's no room for latitude. The classroom walls are still there, and you still have to take people out of the workplace into this kind of training environment. I don't think really that's the solution to all of our needs. It may solve some of our problems, but I think this is almost anachronistic now, even with the technology in it. People learn very much on the job now. People learn at the coalface or wherever they're working, and often they have a device in their hands which is very personal to them. And this is what I want to talk about today. I mean, look at this here. This is a real picture. This was taken in 1970. This is a guy called Dr. Denton Cooley, and he's performing a new coronary artery bypass technique. That is a real picture. I mean, you can find pictures like this all over the internet, but they're not doctored. They're not deep fake. They are actually real pictures of what was happening in them days. This is training on the job. I worked for 25 years in the National Health Service, and I saw stuff like this happening, I swear to you. And there's a patient underneath that lot, a real living person, unconscious and not able to defend themselves. Can you imagine? But this is what we see today. And I just want to point out that there are issues when we integrate technology into learning environments and into workplace, because bearing in mind we have several generations. I heard the story, and I mean, this could have been my father. My father is 91 years old, and he blogs. He uses Facebook as his blogging tool. He connects with all the family. And when he connected with my daughter, who was 20 at the time. Can you imagine? He friended her on Facebook, and her first response was, WTF, Grandad's on Facebook. And so he comes back and says, what does WTF stand for? And her eyes start to swivel, you know, and she thought about it, and she said, welcome to Facebook, Grandad. We've got to be careful. The only trouble is he now uses it with all his friends, you know, WTF, Vicar, you know, and they're all using it, a whole generation. And the problem is when we start using these acronyms and these abbreviations, it means different things to different generations. We've got to be so careful what we say and how we convey ourselves within these shared digital environments. But this is exactly what we're looking at here. We're looking at the difference now, I think, between training and learning. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I just will point out one thing here. Learning is much more active than training. Training is often quite passive, quite bland. It's very focused. It's about transmission of what's in my head into your head. What I should be doing and what you should be doing is saying, okay, here's what's in my head, and now it's in your head. But now go away and find stuff that I don't know about so that the whole organization will learn from it. That's learning. It's a big difference, isn't it? Here's an example of that. This is, well, you know what this is. This is the Mandelbrot set. It's a fractal. It's actually what I would call a recursive mathematical equation that's been visualized. And all it does is repeats and repeats and repeats itself, smaller and smaller, and you get less and less return for it. What we should be doing is we should be looking at learning that's discursive, which involves a lot of discussion, a lot of social connections, a lot of problem solving, a lot of inquiry-based learning. Mike Sharples talked about this morning. If you didn't hear his session, then you missed a treat. Thanks, Mike, for that this morning. That was great. I'll give you an example of recursive learning. Here is a formula that was presented to this student. It's the model, if you like. And then the teacher tries to test to see whether the student has grabbed the formula and then can translate it to another example. And the student produces this. I'll take a while for you to sink in, yeah, but it does eventually hit you, doesn't it? Yeah. This is a perfect example of recursive learning. It's just reproduction of something, and it's very shallow. What we need to go is a lot deeper than that. And the only way we're going to get a lot deeper is by getting ourselves involved in discursive learning. How do we do that? Well, this is wrong, actually. The zone of proximal development is the second circle. I got this wrong, and I should have changed this. But Vygotsky says, look, knowledgeable others are really what makes the difference between what we can learn on our own and what we can learn together. And the social learning aspect there, I think, is really important in all organizations. Knowledgeable others are important, but I'm suggesting now that actually there's a technology scaffold that's happening, digital scaffolding, as I call it. Here's an example of that. I'm going to rush through these because otherwise we'll run out of time. Anyone know who this is? This is a Kenyan athlete, a javelin thrower called Joshua Yego. Look him up. Brilliant guy. He won the gold medal in the 2015 World Championships, and he got the silver medal the following year at the Rio Olympics. Do you know how he learned? He had no coach. He learned all of his skills through YouTube. YouTube was his coach. He watched videos of all the fabulous javelin throwers of the past, people like Jan Zelezny from the Czech Republic and people like Steve Buckley from the UK, all the big champions. He watched them and copied them perfectly. He emulated them, and then he took it farther, because basically he was throwing farther than they ever could. And this is what an example of discursive learning, by watching and then modeling and then taking it farther and extending it beyond what you learned yourself. It's digital scaffolding of the best type. So technology does play a part in that kind of learning. And yes, people are important, but they're also unique. Now, here's part of the solution, I think, I want to try and put to you today. And let's have a discussion about this, which maybe can continue after this presentation today. I'll give you an example of how unique we are. This is the Ishihara test. Can everyone see this? Who can see anything in there? Most of you. Who can see nothing other than a whole load of blobs? Besides me. Some of you, yeah. That means that you have some kind of colorblindness. Here's another one. Who can see anything in that? More of you can see it, but who still can't see anything in there? You see, that's the baseline reading. So most people can see something in there. You can see a 4 perhaps. But the first one, separates out those who have some kind of colorblindness against those who don't. And I was born with a colorblindness deficit. So that's one type of division. Let's try this one. Who can see anything here? Some of you can see it. Shout out what you think it is. It's a dog. What type of dog? As my kids would say, it's a damnation, Dad. It's a damnation. It's a Dalmatian dog in the leaves. And a lot of people still can't see that even when you point it out to them. These are visual differences. And here's another one. What do you think that is? This really separates us all because most of you will have different ideas about what you think it is. The Rorschach Test. And we all have different ideas about what we think it is. Some people say it's a butterfly or, a demon or, there's two people dancing. There's a whole range of things, an insect. And this just goes to show that we're all uniquely different. Everyone in here comes in with a different perspective on life. We come in here with different experiences. We come in with different ideas about how we want to learn, when we want to learn, who we want to learn with, what problems we want to solve. It's a whole range of things. And really, we go back to the apprenticeship model, a pre-industrial model, the just-for-me model, which when the industrial model came in, where everybody had to synchronize their behavior and turn up for work at the same time, and when the bell sounded at lunchtime, you had to be hungry. That kind of school model, we went into the just-in-case standardized curriculum. Later on, when we got wise to that, bespoke courses came in. They started to tailor them as a just-in-time way of learning. And of course, then we approach what we now call the personalized learning mode, where it's not just for me, but it's also just enough. It's very tailored, very personalized, and from that we derive things like the personal learning environment. Each of you, and me included, Ildiko, even you, all of us, if you sat at the top table, all of us have a personal learning environment, and it includes not just content and tools, but people as well. Our personal learning network. These are the people and the content and the tools that we rely on to actually not just learn, but also apply that learning in lots of multi-contexts. And that's the really exciting bit about having technology today that is so personalized that you can fit it in your pocket or your handbag or whatever. There is this set of tools, as I said, that we use. I call this Learning 2.0. Tim O'Reilly used to call it the architecture of participation. This idea that the social web is there with all these tools available, and the end product is invariably user-generated content. Younger people that come into your organization today, and I dare say most of the people here today, you are creating content all the time. This guy here with the camera is creating content. You guys clicking, taking notes with your phones, you are creating content. Hopefully you'll share that content, you'll repurpose it, you'll remix it. And in so doing, you're going to be learning, but so is your community of practice. And that, to me, is an incredibly powerful way of helping organizations to compete through new ways of learning. Here's one for you to think about. I was in New Zealand a couple of years back, and I met a group of academics who I was working with, and they were health professionals. In fact, they were specialists in something called anatomy and physiology, how the body works, how it's fit together and so on. And they were training up to 3,000 students every month. And I said, how do you do this? They said, well, we bring them in cohorts of 300, and we do the same lecture 10 times every week. I said, wow. I said, so what's your problem? They said, well, in the first week, everyone turns up. In the second week, you get about half the people there. And the third week, it's about a third, and it just tails off. How do we keep people there? I said, well, firstly, stop lecturing. And then secondly, how do you engage them? Well, there's lots of ways of doing that. And they said, well, tell us a way. I said, well, how about Ungoogleable Questions? They said, is there such a thing? I said, there is now. I just made it up. But the thing is, Ungoogleable Questions are there things out there that you cannot Google. And they said, well, no, there isn't. I said, well, yes, there are. And they said, how can there possibly be? Google covers everything. I said, Google isn't a god, Google's just a tool. I said, and it's not perfect. There are things out there that you cannot Google. They said, well, give us an example. And I said, if I can give you an example based on anatomy and physiology, and you are the experts in New Zealand on this, if I can give you an example of a Ungoogleable question that you cannot find an answer to, and you don't know the answer to it, will you believe me? They said, yeah. I said, okay. And I thought, oh, now I've done it. I've put my foot in it now. So I had to think of a question. So I said, okay, what is there exactly 5 of in the normal human body? And somebody said, it's easy, it's fingers. I said, count them. Wrong. Senses, I said, no, there's actually about 32 senses if you understand the human body and psychology. And so then they started to get annoyed, and they started to get a bit frustrated, so they started Googling it, yeah? And they couldn't find anything. Does anyone know the answer to it, by the way, apart from the people that I spoke to yesterday? And there's some in the round, Paul knows the answer. The answer is, they kicked themselves, 5 lobes of the lung. You've got 3 one side and 2 the other. You're asymmetric. And I said to them, why are you asymmetric? And after they stopped kicking themselves, they said, that's because the heart's slightly inclined to the left. Anatomy and physiology specialists, you see, they know these things. And I said, so why is the heart slightly inclined to the left? And so they said, and I said, these are gateway questions. This is discursive learning. Because now you're creating a conflict, a cognitive dissonance within the heads of all your students. And you're saying to them, look, there's no easy solution to this. Go away and find a solution. It's problem-based. It's challenge-based. It's inquiry-based. And suddenly they are actively engaged. And now they're curious, and now they may be annoyed as well. And they said, well, you know, how does that happen? I said, well, the learning is in the struggle. The learning is in the struggle. If you think about it, most of the things that you learned, you had to struggle to learn them. You had to engage with it, didn't you? And I think the important thing is that tools like Google can be used in that capacity. We don't think about it in this way. We think about it as a solution to our problems and the answer, when in fact it can also provide you with questions. The same goes with Wikipedia. I challenge my students sometimes. I'm retired now, but the ones that I used to teach, I used to challenge them and say, look, okay, we all think that Wikipedia is inaccurate and has problems, but how about if I challenge you to find a gap in the knowledge that we're talking about here? Let's say learning theories or whatever, and there's a gap in that knowledge. Can you meet the challenge and create a wiki page with that subject in mind, and then see how long you can keep it up there before it gets taken down? Big challenge. You try it yourself. There's not many gaps out there, but if you can find a gap and you put the actual page up, how long does it stay up there before it gets ripped down by somebody? So these are tools that can be used both ways. And I show my students this. This is my final piece for you. I say, what's wrong with this? And I swear to you, one of my students a few years ago, she said, is it 70%? I said, no, look again. And then she realized what it was. She hadn't looked at it properly. So really what we need is this is a bit slippery, that we need digital literacies. In fact, we need digital wisdom. We need what Howard Rheingold calls the BS detector. Because there's so much rubbish out there on the web, as we've already kind of understood, that we need, all of us, you, me, all of the people that we work with, our students if we're teaching, all of us need this digital wisdom, this digital literacy, if you like. And I'll explain it to you like this. It's not just a skill. It's not even a competency. It goes beyond that. When I was learning to drive in the UK, I learned to drive on the left-hand side of the road, the right-hand side of the car, with a gear shift, and I had to learn all the highway code and all the signs and what they meant and so on. When I went to America to work, although I was competent as a driver, I'd been driving for 20-odd years in the UK, and it was kind of an unconscious thing for me. As soon as I went to America, I got into the car and I thought, I'm on the wrong side of the car. And I was on the left side of the car, I was on the right side of the road. There wasn't even a gear stick, it was kind of like an automatic. And I thought, how do I work this without looking like an idiot? It took me a long time, always, to actually become competent again. Because essentially what I had to do was assimilate an alien environment. America was alien to me at the time. I had to assimilate and become literate in a new environment. And I suggest to you that before we become fluent in a digital environment, which is, let's face it, is alien to most of us, we need to have these literacies. We need to be able to understand the nuances and the kind of the finer details of. I mean, who knew, for instance, that writing in capital letters was shouting? But we all know it. We've had to learn it somehow, haven't we? These are little literacies that we've learned to allow us to become proficient in the digital age. And I'm suggesting to you here that if people are going to be learning effectively and discursively within organizations today, they need to be literate within the digital environment. So, I'll just finish with this. Here's a quote from Socrates. Facepalm time, I'm sorry about this. I asked my son to find me a picture of Socrates. It's embarrassing, Ildiko. What do you think? I mean, should I just go? I'll just get off the stage. No. Actually, no, I think I can rectify this. If I just use this gizmo, I can rectify this. Anyway, it was Plato that said it. So I've got find a picture of Plato. Hang on a second. I'll just drink of water. Damn it, that's Socrates. Hang on. Wait a minute. Hey, there we are. Good. Good. Round of applause, everyone. Yeah. We managed it in the end. What you've just witnessed is my passing shot, my parting repartee for you here today, is what you've just seen is the survival of the fittest content, the evolution of knowledge in action, or Darwinianism. All right? And this, for me, is part of our future. It's how to iterate and reiterate, and how to revise, and how to re-edit, remix, repurpose learning to the point where it becomes so useful for us that we cannot do without it any other way. And that's my talk for you. Thank you very much.